Oikos presents 15 Seconds of Strength.
Here we go. Steve's got a trunk full of groceries and no one to help him.
Oh, that's tough, Jim. Looks like a 5-trip load at least.
He grabs the first bag, the second. Bob, it looks like he's trying to do it all in one trip. He shimmies the door open, steps over the dog, and he stumbles.
Oh, right into the kitchen without missing a beat. Jim, now that's a man who eats his protein-packed Oikos.
With 15 grams of complete protein in each cup, Oikos Triple Zero can help build strength for every day. Oikos, stronger makes everything better.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, April the 3rd. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and David Williams. He's produced the program. We're looking forward to speaking with you this morning on a topic of your choosing. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. Off to Switzerland we go to check in on Team Guizhou, Team Canada, participating at the World Championships. I watched them play against the Americans yesterday. Now, the Americans have been up and down. As a matter of fact, their skip John Schuster has never beaten Guizhou, and now they're 0-8 after Team Guizhou absolutely pulverized them 8-2 to take the record to 5-1. Then they played early this morning, beat the Netherlands 7-4, so now they're 6-1 and they've hit their stride. They look terrific. Let's go. And watch the Habs game last night. I tell you what, Alex Nahuk has really become a real fixture as a top six forward. No doubt about it. Last night he had a couple of assists, 3 shots on goal. He played over 20 minutes. He was absolutely flying. He was a second star. A nice 5-3 victory for the Habs over one of the best teams in the league, the Florida Panthers. And bad news on the hockey front. And this is not just a hockey story, and we'll elaborate on that. So the Newfoundland Growlers, former Kelly Cup champions in the ECHL, are no more. So they've had issues with their bills and what have you, and now their board of directors has effectively removed them from the league, cancelled their membership, and the quote is for failure to fulfill its obligations under the ECHL bylaws. This is a problem. So Deacon Sports and Entertainment own the Newfoundland Growlers and the Trois Rivières Lyon. They managed to find a deal to salvage the Trois Rivières club, but the Growlers are gone. So, of course, this has wide-ranging impact. Let's stick with the hockey front for a second. So for the players who are on an ECHL contract, they're now free agents. If you were playing with the Growlers on an American League contract, you are restricted from playing anywhere else in the ECHL. So a problem for some players. But this comes with an issue concerning the presence that they had in the community, which was real. Staffing issues at St. John's Sports and Entertainment, specifically the Mary Brown Centre, of course, has an impact on my friend and colleague Ben Murphy, who did tremendous work with Chris Ballard calling the games. But then you take it a step further. So the issue regarding business activity. Now, I can't quantify it with a dollar and cent, but especially on weeknight games, you know that any additional little bit of traffic in your bar or your pub or your establishment or your restaurant, every little bit helps. That's gone by the wayside. And now if you're a taxpayer here in the city of St. John's and couldn't care less about the Growlers, you care about your tax dollars. With the removal of one of the anchor tenants that joined the Newfoundland Rogues in the basketball, they're gone. That has an absolute distinct problem. We know that our property taxes went up some 13% this year in the city of St. John's. You take into account that the subsidy or the operating grant from the city to St. John's Sports and Entertainment is $7 million, unless, as Brent Mead says, the new CEO, they can come up with more night activities, think outside the box, do whatever they can to bring more operations into Mary Brown Centre, like the Grand Slam of Curling, and more activity at the Convention Centre, because that's what St. John's Sports and Entertainment is, represents both entities. But this is absolutely bad news, no matter how you slice it. And again, doesn't matter if you're a hockey fan. If this results in an increase in the operating grant from the city to St. John's Sports and Entertainment, that hits all of our pocketbooks, regardless if you've ever seen the puck drop on the ice down at NBC. So, you want to take it on? Let's do it. But I think that's really unfortunate. This is a quick one regarding high school basketball. So there's an opportunity for people to vote here in this province for the best players and best teams. So this is in an operation called CANLETES, CANLETES. And this is about the Atlantic Canada All-Star Game pending on April 27th at Dalhousie University at their strange building, the Dalplex. So you can simply go online, just like you did when you were voting for Rex Scouty, to be not only nominated, but be recorded and recognized as the Atlantic Canada Player of the Year. So, inside the Player of the Year on the female side, Sarah Reid from Gonzaga High School right here in the city of St. John's. On the Atlantic Coach of the Year, there is Bree Vallis from Gonzaga High School. Atlantic Canada Team of the Year, 2 from this province, Gonzaga High School and Holy Heart High School. So if you want to take the opportunity, you can vote right up until the 13th of this month. You just go to canletes.ca, CANLETES.ca, and cast your vote. See if we can put them over the top. All right. Someone asked me why we weren't talking about minimum wage, but we have. You know, on the 1st of April, the minimum wage went from $15 an hour to $15.60. And yes, we can talk about livable wage and all the fact that not every minimum wage earner is the same and has the same life circumstance. There's some 16,000 people in the province earning minimum wage and many more earning less than $20. And yes, there's a business implication, and yes, there's the ability to keep the wolf away from the door and pay your bills and buy your groceries. And just another friendly reminder, if I don't bring it up, doesn't mean it's not of importance. And if you think that we have missed something, or you want to elaborate on something you hear from a caller or me, just do exactly that. Now, here's some numbers that are absolutely mind-boggling. I'm not going to suggest that everyone earning minimum wage has an education deficit. But the opportunity to thrive and have meaningful, gainful employment will certainly have a direct relationship with the level of training and or education that one possesses. Absentee numbers. These are off the charts. When the former child youth advocate Jackie Lake Kavanagh brought forward her report about chronic absenteeism, those numbers were bad enough. The recent updated numbers are off the charts. And again, it doesn't matter if you have someone belong to you in school. The success of the province is going to rely in large part on education, K-12 and post-secondary. So here's some numbers for your consideration. In the 2022-2023 number of high school students were absent for about 10% of the year. That rose to an astounding 67.8%. That's up from 48.8% in 2018-2019. 67.8% of high school students are chronically absent from school. We know the implication that means for potential graduation. Moving on. Nearly half of the students in the K-6 system will report to be absent for 10% or more of the school year. So that's 49.9%. That's up from 22.9% in 2018-2019. In junior high, the numbers rose from 34.7% to 60% in 3 years. The chronic absenteeism number, and this is well documented across various jurisdictions in this country, if you're chronically absent in grade 6, 75% of those students will not graduate from high school. And I think it's fair to say that without a high school education, your opportunities in this world are absolutely limited. Yes, there's things you can do, and yes, some people will manage to thrive without a high school education, but they will be the exception, not the rule. So those numbers are completely unsustainable. So we don't necessarily know why people are absent from school. Now, some teachers and administrators might have some idea, but to capture the reasons behind all of this overwhelming percentage of absenteeism, this is something we're all going to have to put our heads together. And it's not just the Department of Education and or the teachers and or administrators, it's absolutely the family as well. So we know it could be issues regarding transportation or domestic violence or poverty or bullying or whatever the case may be. But we've got to turn this trend around. Do these absenteeism numbers have a correlation with the amount of school violence we're seeing? The NLTA says they're looking at a 40% increase in violent interactions in the schools, 30 of which will require calls to the police. So yes, people will say, hey, just because someone said your mother dresses you funny, that's not violence. But there are distinctly issues concerning potential violence when someone threatens you. Right? Is that a reason why children are staying home from school? Has the disconnect because of the pandemic said, well, I woke up, I have a sniffle, I'll just check in on Google Classroom? because something has to give here. Does it have a direct relationship with the numbers we've seen in the decline in math, science, and reading scores? Very likely. Now, to be fair, that trend has been downward since 2003. It's been further exacerbated because of the pandemic, and we haven't even factored in the concept of learning loss in this province. They have in other provinces. They did a deep dive into the curriculum to ensure that they were able to make the very best possible opportunity for children to catch up. If you're as disconnected from school as these students are, based on the numbers, catching up becomes virtually impossible, especially for the underachiever, especially for those who struggle with some of the core academic programs like math and science and reading comprehension. We should take this very seriously. And again, it's a school community conversation. It's just not a one-size-fits-all way to turn this trend around, because these leaps are not insignificant. High school students, up to 67.8% are chronically absent, up from almost 50%. And then 22% from 49.9% in the K-6 system, up from 22%. In junior high, 34.7% to 60% in 3 years. So for the life of me, I can't understand why all of those education headlines are not dominating the conversation. But of course, it's up to you what we talk about. And inside the schools, this is a very quick one. So when the federal government announces $1 billion over the course of 5 years to implement a school lunch program that will feed an additional 400,000 students, yes, the devil's going to be in the details as to whether or not it becomes a really hefty price tag for administration of these programs. But it's a funny thing, and I'm not surprised because that's the nature of the beast these days. When the call is for the federal government to stop sending money abroad and to spend money here to help their own, and then we're told, well, not that way. Yes, there's lots of reasons as to why so many children are hungry in this country, but it's hard to believe that if we do this right and we streamline it and make it as effective and as efficient as possible, it's hard to vision and view feeding children in school as being a bad thing. But anyway, I'm told it is a bad thing. Also, I think we're looking at a call today regarding early childhood education and daycare, spaces and $10 a day, access and all the rest of it. Again, all feels and sounds good, and once more, the research is clear. Regardless if you have a child in daycare and or in need of daycare, access and affordability is important to the overall economic growth. Anyway, you want to talk about it? We can do it. Let's talk about housing and development. We all know there's a housing crisis in this country. So, pretty encouraging numbers coming from the city of St. John's, I have to say. So, the sentiment out there has long been that the city is anti-development. The time for permitting, the duplication of inspections, all the rest of these things. But this year, it looks like they're off to a flying start. Now, some of that may indeed be fueled by some different pots of money that have made it more attractive, but here's some numbers. In the city at this moment in time, last year there was $40 million in building permits that were issued. $60 million in permits issued so far this year. We're $20 million ahead of last year's numbers. That's pretty encouraging stuff. The city has approved 17 permits for 1 and 2 family homes compared with just 14 of the entirety of 2023. Now, not every housing application is going to be approved, but that is the city off to a flying start. I heard from Councillor Ron Ellsworth, really pleased and happy to say that this debunks the concept that the city of St. John's is anti-development, and these numbers, they kind of tell their own story, so that's pretty good news here in the city. Talking about housing on the larger scale, to broaden it outside the bloody towny focus. Okay, so we've talked about the Housing Accelerator Fund, and there has been additional monies announced. And of course, the government is on they're traipsing around the country with pre-budget announcements, which is going to be delivered on the 16th of April, very much unlike years past. But anyway, so there's going to be another $400 million added to the Housing Accelerator Fund. Good thing. But for municipalities that don't have the staffing required and the horsepower to even fill out the applications, that's something we have to try to understand and address, whether it be at MNL as the umbrella representative organization or other strategies we can employ. But here's the big one announced. And again, look, it's our tax dollars. We don't owe them any congratulations or applause by trying to invest our tax dollars back into us. But anyway, here's the numbers. The government is going to create a $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund. Big numbers, right? The trick with this one, it comes with strings attached. Now, many municipalities and or provinces have been very staunch on their unwillingness to build density housing, like townhouses and fourplexes and the like. But here's what's coming insofar as strings attached. So the money is going to be dedicated to construction and upgrading of water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste infrastructure. communities right across the country are not compliant with federal regulations. So this is helpful. But here comes the strings. They include allowing more missing middle homes. What that means, by definition, is duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, multi-unit buildings. They're also imposing a 3-year freeze on development charges for cities with a population of more than 300,000 people, which, of course, does not apply to this province. The provinces have, I think, until January 1st to negotiate an agreement on this front, and some provinces won't. They simply won't. Like, you can bet your bottom dollar Quebec won't, because they say every bit of federal money that's spent on provincial jurisdiction must flow through the government of Quebec versus the communities that apply for and are successful. Here's what has been the key feature of the dental plan, the pharmacare plan, and all the rest of it, is enough detail to know exactly how we should score these particular programs. We know the first $1 billion out of 6 is going to go towards shovel-ready projects. They're ready to go. And so that money is going to be made available in short order. Then you look at the additional or the other $5 billion, and we really don't know. So it's just sort of gray, spread out over a longer period of time. What does that mean? Don't know. And expect the flow of that money under negotiations with the provinces and the territorial partners. But here we go. So we cannot find out how the money is going to be budgeted for each year or over how many years. We have no idea what's going to be allocated province to province. Is it going to be done straight up on the per capita numbers? You know, because we harken back to personal protective equipment and whatnot. We're about 1.2% of the national population. So what kind of money can be expected to flow to this province? We really don't know. But the housing numbers, like even in this province, we're told we need to build 60,000 units over the course of 5 years. Last year, housing starts in this province were around 900. So all of these pots of money, hopefully they can make it attractive to build. But then, again, the key will be building it is one thing, making it affordable is another. Because as a private sector developer, with the current cost of skills, trades and materials, coming out the other end with an actual affordable unit that hits the target for those who are now precariously housed or trying to get into the market themselves. Anyway, you want to talk about it, that's a big number, but we don't have all the details to know whether or not it's any good or not. All right, very provincial conversation. The crab business. So the crab harvest is set to open on the 6th of April, just 3 days from now. It's not going to happen. So there was lots of relief and the concept of we won when the protesters and the union negotiated with the province to do a variety of things. Increase capacity, look at foreign ownership, controlling agreements, and the big number was outside buyers. All right. It was always going to boil back down to what the price would be. And so with the inability of the province to change the price-setting formula and or the panel process, they basically just picked one number versus the other number. So the Association of Seafood Producers put forward $2.60. Apparently the FFAW put somewhere around $2.83. They chose the ASP number. It looks like there's going to be a tie-up. I mean, I've heard from a variety of harvesters over the last 24 hours that say they're not fishing at $2.60. So where do we go from here? There was the thought, and has been reported by several, that they've had conversations with outside buyers from where I don't know. But they're talking about the possibility to buy the crab at $3.25. So you can only hope that the ASP has not created a whip for its own tail. What percentage of the snow crab is going to leave the province? If they're able to get $3.25 versus $2.60, you do the math. What are you going to do? And even the difference between the ASP price and the FFAW is a reduction of some $30 million to harvesters. We're told inside that $3.25 from an outside buyer that will indeed cover things like ICE and pay into employment insurance, what have you. But remember, last year, because of the 6-week tie-up, an arbitrator ruled that the FFAW is not allowed to do that, and the ASP will be paid compensation for those 6 weeks, yet to fully understand the documentation required and any dollar amount associated with so-called damages. But here we go. It's not going to be pretty. There's absolutely going to be more protests. When they start, who knows? They're talking about formulating a plan at this moment in time. The union always has been quite frustrated. They're not allowed and don't have the ability to strike. So as much as there was a feeling of victory for the crab harvesters, and because the outside buyers are for every species, so we unfortunately focus in on crab, I guess simply because it's the most lucrative, and grabbed all the headlines last year. But the price was always going to drive the conversation. drive the protest, see whether or not they were actually going to go out on the water on the 6th of April, and it sounds like many will not be doing exactly that. So if you're a harvester or a processor, you want to talk about it, we can do it. How are we doing out there this morning, David? I wanted to talk about the Foreign Election Interference Commission that has been struck. It's not that long ago, that was the number one headline in the country. And now, of course, we'll talk about carbon tax and housing and other issues, but that commission continues to do their work. Yesterday, fascinating testimony offered by former Liberal member for Don Valley, Han Dong. Remember, the allegations is that he was working with the Chinese to encourage them to keep hold of Michael Spavor, Michael Korvig. He says that's not true. They talked about him busing a variety of people in, students in particular, as part of the nomination process. Apparently that's not true either. There were buses to bring seniors to these stations, but it's amazing how something as critically important as the integrity in our elections has gone by the wayside. You know, we do have pretty short attention spans, and the news cycle changes very quickly. But that bit of work done by Justice Uhl, I would think, is pretty important. And unfortunately, today, one very helpful component of the mental health delivery system in this country is going away. We had a conversation about it yesterday, and that's Wellness Together. I cannot for the life of me understand how anybody in politics thinks this is a good idea. It's been helpful. It was there 24/7. And it wasn't just about mental wellness, mental health, and mental illness. It was also about substance abuse, of which the country is struggling on both fronts. And something that was working. And we put many people onto it with great success. Patient therapists at different hospitals across the country using it themselves and referring their patients to that platform. And now, because of a funding issue, we just talked about $1 billion for school lunch. We just talked about $6 billion for housing, right? We talked about national pharmacare, dental care, all coming with enormous price tags. The lack of attention to mental health, mental wellness, and mental illness in this country is disgraceful. And it's going to backfire, and we're already seeing it. So for the federal government, and particularly our 6 members on the governing side, can you please speak up and let us know your stance on the mental health approach that not only the feds are taking, but the provinces are taking? We need to do better. It's a societal issue. It's devastating individuals. It's eroding families. It can be tragic outcomes. And these programs were important. Federal government, do the right thing. Continue flowing the funding to Wellness Together and Pocket Well, and add capacity. I know it's all provincial jurisdiction, but federal guidance sometimes, as opposed to federal imposition, is required. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Kevin's going to kick it off, talk about an alternative to wind energy. Curious to hear what that is. And then we're going to talk about daycare, I believe. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin on the top of the board on line number 1. Good morning, Kevin. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
Doing grand. How about you?
That's bad. I have 2 concerns in relation to the project on the Port Peninsula and, of course, Codry. I'll approach this in two phases. Number 1, rather than getting into details, we definitely need a federal assessment done. We need the expertise. We need, as they say, we need doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs to be unbiased and come up with solutions, because right now it is impossible. And this project is way, way too massive for the area, which makes sense.
Just so I think, let me fill in a blank, which I believe the listeners might be curious about. So federal intervention through the Environmental Assessment Agency of Canada, what that looks like differently than what the provincial mechanism looks like is that there's the opportunity for the funding of intervenor status and to bring in so-called experts in whatever field, hydrology, environmental sciences, and otherwise. That's what you're getting at, is it, Kevin?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's correct. We need an unbiased panel, to bring in this into discussion, especially with the expertise, right? And we all know that this project is not good for the environment. Just alone, the flood they had on the Port Peninsula the last couple of days. Just imagine now, there was a lot of damage to the ecosystem, and just think the people themselves. It was really, really, really a bad experience. Now, that was just a 2-day rain. Now, imagine 2 years of 24/7 construction. something's going to happen, right? So anyway, just to finalize the first phase, just to say, they're going to use over 15 million pounds of dynamite.
I thought it was
Emulsion
6.
Dynamite. Okay, right? Pardon?
I thought it was 6 was the number.
No, I did the figures today on Google there, and okay. Having said that, right? Like for instance, if you divide it in half, say with cod rye and Port-au-Port, okay. So just to give you an illustration, you know that the amount of tonnage would be equal to over 2,500 passenger cars, approximately 3,000 pounds each. That's a lot of cars on a peninsula at one time, right? So imagine all this demolition going on. You know, it's got to do something to the environment. It's got to do something with the ecosystem. This is just for people to say it's not. It's nonsense. Things will happen. It will destroy the environment and the ecology. Okay, let's finish that phase. My second phase is people are saying, well, we need jobs. You know what? I empathize with people from Newfoundland who need jobs. Myself, and a lot of us left Newfoundland to go work elsewhere. And I understand that. However, we do have an alternative. And the alternative we have is in existence now. It's tourism. You know, I'll give you a quick figure now. This is from 2019 because during the COVID, not every business was doing well. So anyway, in 2019, the overall revenue was $1.4 billion. Think about it, $1.4 billion. If you equate that to what WGH2 is saying, the revenue to the province is 11.7. Here's my take.
And that's only one of the proposals.
Yes, right. That's one of the proposals. Now, if you look at this, take for instance, all across Newfoundland, all these towers, massive towers. Now, right now, the revenue that's coming into the government is tourism, which is the second. Now, they're bringing an awful lot of money. So, did they think, or did they sit down and say, okay, if we approve this project, what would happen? What would to tourism? Because I tell you, down in mainland, at the tea house, I've talked to many people from away, France, Switzerland, Germany, all those places, and they say the reason why they come down is because it's the scenery, it's the rugged coastline. And they say ultimately there's no wind towers. Now, if you take all the projects that will be approved and line up all these towers across Newfoundland, do you think we may lose the tourist industry?
No.
Right? And that's a question we're going to ask ourselves. However, all the government's got to do is invest into the people with monies, with profits from tourism, and let's get on board and actually plan things. Make this industry viable. People will come from all over the place, as you know. So that's the proposal. Just give us more money to enhance what we have now in regards to tourism.
Yeah, but of course, the proposals are an energy play. Not all necessarily about job creation and revenues, and I don't think we're going to collect enough in the way of revenues to the provincial coffers from any of these proposals. I think we've kind of undercut ourselves a little bit on water and land lease and what have you. But I get the concept of tourism, and we should always look at tourism as a growth opportunity because it absolutely is. I know some people in the industry they don't like that term, but when you have the possibility to grow year over year, to try to replicate what some other places where people go for the rugged beauty and the scenery. Like, for instance, Iceland. And I know we can't make direct comparisons, whether it be here in Norway in the oil business or here in Iceland in tourism, but they've got it figured out. We've got some built-in problems here regarding, for instance, access. But remarkable how you said just, let's put some more money in to enhance the industry itself. The industry will tell you one of the hurdles they face is access via air, and yet when the province puts some money forward to help WestJet bring a thrice weekly flight to Gatwick, people don't like that either. So it's really become a world where it's hard to satisfy or please anybody, if not everybody.
Okay, so if listen to this then. The project itself is short term. Think about it, it's short term. Tourism is long term, very, very, very long. So I'll give you an example. Okay, the project starts. You got probably a good 3 to 4 years with the employment opportunities. Fine. Then what happens after that? It's cut right down. Boof. Now the jobs are gone. What happens now? So we're back to the same level as we were. Every time something mentions about a project in Newfoundland, that fails, right? So tourism is a long term, and we keep intact the environment and the ecosystem. I mean, you can't get better at that.
I get the comparisons that you're making here, but of course part of the conversation regarding world energy and or Everwind and or Pattern Energy or others, they not only talk about the economics of it, whether it be jobs and taxes and royalties, they're also including I think the number one consideration here for these proponents, not for me or the government necessarily, or you or Marilyn from yesterday or anybody else, is about energy transition. So I think that's also part of the conversation. I do think that part of the resistance in this province is the fact that all of the complications with the environment, and whether it be implications regarding tourism or otherwise, the product itself isn't even for consumption or usage here. Or nowhere domestically as of yet. It's all going to be sent somewhere else to some other country's potential benefit, which does make this a much more complicated conversation.
And well, what baffles me is they don't have the infrastructure on both sides. What I mean both sides, say Newfoundland and Labrador, and say Europe. I mean, there's nothing in place yet.
Yeah, they're building in Rotterdam right at this very moment as we speak. The Germans have also acknowledged that the cost of this green hydrogen, which is extremely expensive, remains yet to be seen whether or not the business case works out. Don't take it from me. The Germans set aside $1.2 billion American of their own to try to subsidize the use of green hydrogen. So it's not perfect. That's for bloody well sure.
And there's an old saying into the investment community: if you have to use government incentives, well, you know what, your project is not going to work.
Well, that means every project in the country doesn't work, because there's very little to nothing that stands on its own 2 feet.
Well, but then again, who pays for it? It's the taxpayers, right?
We pay for everything. The government doesn't have any money.
No, exactly. So the big concern is you talk about green energy. You know what? I'm all for green energy. Yes, there's climate change. Well, we saw it last weekend past on the Port of Port. But here's my thing. How can you say it's for green energy, for climate change, when the product itself will destroy the exact thing that you're trying to keep going? So it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, but what I said is that's what the proponents are saying, not what I'm saying. That's part of their pitch. And this is not just in this province either, nor is that have a political stripe. We've got conservative governments looking at these projects as well. So it's, sometimes I think we get caught up in saying, well, this is a partisan flair or feel to wind energy or what have you. I mean, our closest partners in Nova Scotia, they're looking at the exact same thing. In fact, they're moving ahead with Everwind, who's also here on the Burin Peninsula making a pitch. I'll give you the final thoughts, Kevin, before I have to go.
Well, like I said, we do need a federal assessment. We need to get the professionals, the experts in, unbiased, right? And then probably we'll have an adult conversation, because right now we're not, right?
I appreciate your time this morning, Kevin. Thanks for the call.
You take care. Bye-bye.
You too, sir. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. Elise Stewart's in the queue. She's a Labour advocate. Talk about some recent reports. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Elise Stewart. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great.
It's been a while, Patty, in case you haven't noticed. I'm just back from mat leave, so the airways have been quiet with me for the past year.
Welcome back and congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, Patty. It's great to be back in the midst of a childcare crisis. So that's what I'm calling to chat with you folks about. I think people have seen the new report that highlights the kind of the crisis that we're in childcare. It's twofold. We only have 14% of folks are in regulated childcare spots. We have ECE workers that are, leaving the force en masse. And we have a lot of people, including myself, desperately searching every Facebook group, every LinkedIn page to try and find somewhere to put our child into a daycare space.
It's amazing. I know a family that's got their name on the waiting list during their first trimester.
You know what, Patty? I think it was the line turned pink, and I got onto every waiting list that I possibly could, because that was my first recommendation from all the new moms I knew. Was like, you better get on a child care list. And even so, I think the last one I checked, I'm 120, and there's 6 spots. So I don't think he'll be getting there until perhaps kindergarten. He might actually have a spot by then. So I'm certainly not alone in this. And when I say, there's thousands, there are literally thousands of people that are looking for a child care spot, both regulated and unregulated, and trying to put together like a patchwork quilt of how we go back to work and also have a spot that is safe and secure and enriching for our child. And, I would say that the first thing I get is, oh, you're back to work. What are you doing for childcare? And I either roll my eyes or, throw my hands up in the air to say, what does anybody do for childcare? And then the response I get is twofold. One is to blame the $10 a day childcare system, and then the other is to blame people that are using the $10 a day childcare system that shouldn't. And so I think with the new reports that came out, those myths can kind of be debunked. And that is to say that the $10 a day childcare system is something that we have fought for generations. Our parents' generations, their parents' generations sought to have like a childcare system that worked. The problem isn't the goal of $10 a day, it's the implementation of $10 a day. So we're just not even close to being there, unfortunately. And the government, federal and provincial, have said that they're trying to make moves. They're doing a lot. The problem is, again, that workforce piece. So the John Howard Society came out with this, I would say really depressing report on how ECAs are being treated in this province, their concerns, including low wages. A lot of them are thinking of leaving an already really desperate workforce. So that's kind of part of the problem there. And then the other part that I get, Patty, is, it's people that are using up these regulated spots. And my response is that the goal of universal childcare and $10 a day is that everybody gets to access it. It does not matter where you come from in this province. It doesn't matter what your income is. Our goal is to create a system where everybody is welcome and everybody can access it. And again, we are just so far away from that goal right now that it's easy to blame the symptoms and not really blame the core problem, which is that the $10 a day system is just, it wasn't ready to be implemented, and there's so much more that needs to be done. So that's where we are right now. And I honestly don't, and maybe you have folks calling in, Patty, that have, more hopeful stories, but, I don't see a world where I get my child in care in the next year, right? It's pretty stark out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have one without the other. By that, I mean accessibility and affordability. $10 a day sounds fantastic, and it is if you're lucky enough to have a spot. But the access issue is daunting. So the province says they're on track to create 6,000 childcare spaces by 2026. They say that there's some 8,000 spaces currently in the province, 1,300 of those created since January 2023. But the fact remains, even if we talk about early childhood educators, we need 1,000 more early childhood educators today to satisfy the demand today. So, and even when the government releases those types of numbers, we never know about how many spaces have been lost. So consequently, the net gains. We don't get those numbers because they're not quite as rosy here. The survey that was conducted by the Federation of Labour, if just the top line, 42% of the province's early childhood educators are considering finding a new job. Why? Low wages, no benefits, dental, no sick days, those types of things. If you can have $10 a day to be the headline grabber and or scream from the political bully pulpit, but it doesn't mean we're actually getting anywhere.
No, and the other, disillusionment that I think is happening is that they knew that this was the case, right? When these programs were going to be put in place, when, childcare folks are advocating, they're saying you cannot have an increase in spaces and accessibility if you don't increase the wages and benefits to ECEs. And yet they tried to increase the spaces without doing that fundamental piece of making sure that it's a job that people are secure in, making sure it's a job that is recognized as being a profession, making sure, that folks have benefits And, I've talked to a lot of ECEs through my work that, they don't even get lunch breaks sometimes. Like, they are worked to the bone because anybody that has a child, you get it. There's not a lot of free time out there. You're always doing something. And these folks do, incredible work and invaluable work that unfortunately is not being valued. So, the government is saying all those things, federal, provincial, don't give up on us. It's going to happen. But the reality out there is very different. And I think it's kind of disingenuous for the government to not really recognize what the reality is out there, because then people start to distrust the $10 a day system, which, again, I want to say, like, the goal should not be lost. The aim of creating universal childcare should not be lost because the implementation has not been done correctly. It is still worth fighting for. And recognize that your fight is not against the system, it's against the implementation. So please, to folks out there, again, I am one of you that feels like you're never going to get a spot. Don't blame our aim of having universal accessible childcare, because that is not the problem. It is having those really high wages, benefits packages, protections, all those things that every worker deserves. And certainly the worker that looks after your most precious person deserves that and so much more.
I don't think I've ever heard an argument as to why early childhood educators shouldn't be part of the provincial pension plan, because I'm not suggesting that they get paid like a teacher in grade 6 with a master's degree, but if you're part of the provincial pension plan, that gives you that sense of job security and the apple at the end of the line. So, if you can talk about pay and benefits and dental care and those types of things, but I think what would be a real impetus for people to consider being an ECE is if you were automatically on the provincial pension plan. Now, I know that comes with significant costs, but I guarantee you one thing: it comes with much more significant costs if we don't get it right. 90% of your brain is developed by the time you're 5 years old. We know that children who are involved in early childhood education in a formal setting, they do better in school. I mean, this is not me telling you. These are well understood pieces of academic research. So when we see the numbers of absenteeism in K-12, when we see the levels of violence, when we see the decreased math, science, and reading scores, there's a lot can be accomplished by making sure that we do away with the 80% of children in the province living in a daycare desert. We have all the accessible spaces required at an affordable rate, and if we formalize early childhood education, we probably do infinitely and immediately better in K-12.
Oh, I think without question, and we know places where this has worked better. Like Quebec is usually the model that's used. Yep. And putting these folks, I would say from your mouth to like Fury's ears, yes, these folks should be included into a pension plan system. They should, they're public sector workers in a lot of different ways, and if they're not going to be included in that, they should be protected by a union. They have a professional organization, but having that be more of a concrete, like, we value you, you deserve pension, you deserve protections. You're right. I think that would be a huge step. And again, a lot of pushback that I've gotten is, again, people that are using spaces that don't deserve it. If you're making X amount of dollars, well, they shouldn't have a space. And it's, I kind of flip it back to be like, when folks are making more money, their income is better, they're paying more in taxes. So if our system is a progressive taxation system, that money should be going back into making this really robust, accessible childcare system. So, there are lots of ways that we can do this. Unfortunately, I do think it feels like we're behind the 8 ball with a lot of this, but having a public push to, again, please don't target the system, target the implementation, and make sure that you're fighting for everybody to have a space. And you're right, we have places in this province that I'm calling from, St. John's metro area, and if I can't find a spot, what about folks that are on the South Coast, North? Like, it's even worse in those areas. You don't even have a chance. You depend upon family members to do that childcare work for you a lot of the times, and that's not acceptable. We can do so much better, and I really, really think that we're heading into probably, some election fever is going to start happening soon. And please, everybody, put childcare on. Put it on your list to call your members about in federal and provincial government.
And I'll just go back to a piece of research that came from several schools. McGill did one, Laval did one, talking about affordable and accessible. And again, I don't have children that need childcare. And hopefully my children deliver me some grandchildren somewhere down the line. But, the impact on women returns to the workforce, the impact on taxes collected, the impact on GDP and economic activity is pretty clear. So
there's no evidence against it at this point. It's just kind of putting the pedal to the metal and making sure that you're pushing these reports and pushing this information. Unfortunately, it takes to now. Like I said, this has been generations of time. None of this should be new information, but it's just pushing and making sure that we make this a priority because the long-term impacts are so beneficial to, like you said, workforce, equality, closing the pay gap, all of these things. Like I know a lot of folks, which is, I won't take any more of your time, Patty, but in my situation, that delay going back to work because you can't find childcare. I have a patchwork that I've worked together with my partner and having in-home childcare to hold us over, but that's only going to last us a little while. And then I have to face what do I do? Like, do I take time off work? Do I take a leave? And then am I putting my career back? Am I putting, of course, your income back? Like all of those things are a constant battle that predominantly, predominantly parents in the workforce are facing, and certainly predominantly women in the workforce are facing.
I stayed home for 3 years, and I wouldn't be able to do it today. The need for two incomes for the vast majority of families is the reality we're dealing with. Unless one or the other of the partners or spouses are cardiac surgeons or something, then maybe just maybe you can pull it off. But for what we do for a living, we both have to work. Lise, what's the baby's name?
His name is Milo Miller.
Milo Miller. Sweet.
Yeah, and again, if any regulated spots, as it come to this, we call into Openline for looking for a childcare spot. No, I'm only kidding. We're on lots of lists, so hopefully something opens up in the next 6 to 8 months.
Good luck and congratulations once again. Give Milo Miller a smooch for me.
I certainly will. Thank you so much, Patty.
Thanks, Elise. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the implications of the budget regarding the folks on the Choices for Youth. Tim wants to talk about the carbon tax. We'll get an update on the phone problem that's been persistent in Brookside since the 15th of March. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the Senior Director of Strategy, Fund Development and External Relations with Choices for Youth is Jen Crow, and joins us on 3. Jen, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?
Not too bad on this very non-spring-like morning.
It is exactly that. Not spring-like at all. Where are we going this morning?
So, Patty, in the most recent 2024 budget that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador released, we were so thrilled to see, after many years of advocacy and efforts in partnership with government, an investment of $4.3 million in a provincial integrated youth services network. And Patty, basically what that means is we have been seeing an increase in the amount of youth who are coming through our doors at Choices for Youth over the past several years who have recently arrived in St. John's. So just to give you a sense, in the March 2024 alone, we supported 530 young people. 150 of them recently moved to this city. And when you talk to those young people, they tell you overwhelmingly that they did not want to come to St. John's, but they felt that they had no choice because they were looking for long-term mental health supports. They were looking for affordable or emergency housing. They were looking for 2S LGBTQI+ or Indigenous supports that were simply not accessible in their home community. And so what we started to do several years ago is really look at, how do we better show up in partnership with others across this province to support these young people before they are forced to move to St. John's? And what we have co-developed now with 65 partners across the province and Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services is a model to basically be able to offer regional hubs for those youth where they can get those needs met, mental health, housing, family, natural supports, basic needs, food security, education, employment, all in a one-stop shop. So we're really excited with this investment. We're going to be able to open 2 more sites to start in the next 6 to 8 months or so.
Where will they be?
So we're not sure yet. We've been working with 8 steering committees across the province for several years, over 4 years now. And they are located right across Newfoundland and Labrador, everywhere from Marystown, Clarenville, right up to Goose Bay and Lab West. And we'll be offering we'll be launching a request for proposals for those 2 initial sites. We don't want to choose those. Rather, we want communities to be able to put forward proposals with their unique model of integrated youth services, and then a collaborative group of folks, inclusive of community members, community agencies, and government will select where those first 2 sites are.
I mean, it's pretty important stuff. And what you said is easy to understand as to reasons why. If I'm in need of additional supports, whether or not I'm coming to avail of Choices for Youth support programs or what have you, we do know that there's all kinds of programs and support systems that are in place in urban settings that are nowhere near what's required in more rural settings, and especially in Labrador, I would suggest. So there's an obvious reason why. So the work that you're doing to expand to a couple of additional hubs can help on a variety of reasons. It can keep people in their own community where they probably have a better chance at a successful, meaningful, gainful life, as opposed to come to St. John's, start anew, don't have any family or friends possibly here, don't really know how to access any of the programs. Consequently, people are spinning their wheels, even though there might be help right around the corner, but they don't know how to get it.
That's exactly it, Patty. And one of the things that we've had to focus on, frankly, over the last several years is developing programming that's specific to youth when they arrive in St. John's. So we actually developed a program called the Soft Landing Program, and that is specifically designed so that when youth move to St. John's, they have a program where we can rapidly rehouse them, make sure that they're connected to affordable housing and different supports, so mental health supports, primary care, food security, education, employment. We had to design that because we were just seeing such an influx of youth into St. John's who needed those services. But I think exactly to your point, what we would prefer to do is, the 26% of youth who are coming to us who've recently moved to the city, we would like to see that carved off of the number of youth that we support in St. John's because they're being better supported closer to home. So that's really the goal of this. And this is an international best practice, this model, integrated youth services. So there's sites right across Canada. And through a 2021 study, the youth who were supported through these integrated youth services sites reported a 67% increase in self-reported mental well-being and a 65.5% decrease in the severity of mental health problems. So we know from a mental health lens that this is a proven model. And I think where we really come at this, Patty, is Choices for Youth has evolved. We started as an agency that's really focused on ending youth homelessness, but quickly in our evolution realized that to end homelessness, it's not just to focus on housing. It's to focus on housing, mental health, primary care, food security, education, income, employment. And so we've really evolved as an organization to focus on all those core areas. And as we look to establish this integrated youth services network across the province with our partners, we want to make sure we're hitting on all those areas too. It's not enough for us to just say, okay, you can come here and get your mental health needs met. Well, you can come here and get your mental health needs met, but we'll also find you housing, and we'll also make sure you have a hot meal. And we'll also make sure that if you're ready to go back to school or engage in the labor market, that there's opportunities for you. So we're hoping to be able to kind of scale that with partners and really be able to enhance outcomes for children, youth, and young families. And I just have to pick up on what Elise was saying previous to me on your show, because I think that piece around childcare is such a critical component as well. And when we think about what would make all the difference to many of the vulnerable young moms who we support, having the ability to go back to school or to enter into the labor market is so contingent on having that affordable child care. And I think one of the things that we're really seeing on that side of things is so much stigma around those young moms who are trying to navigate childcare while being on subsidy. The addressing that stigma is part of this model around integrated youth services to say that, these are sites for anyone, any young person who needs them. And we know, Patty, over the past several years that there's been such a massive increase in need, mental health need, housing insecurity, childcare needs. So we want to really reduce the stigma through this model and make these accessible places for any young person who just needs some help in their life and needs to be able to kind of get back on their feet. I appreciate the time this morning, Jen. When you have some more information about where these new 2 additional hubs would be, I'll be fascinated to hear about it. Absolutely. We'll certainly be in touch, Patty. I appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much. Take care. You too, Jen. Bye-bye. Jen Crow, Senior Director of Strategy, Fund Development and External Relations at Choices for Youth. Let's take a break. When we go back, an update on the phone debacle in the town of Brookside. Is Tim going to be back in the queue, David Williams? Maybe Tim was there to talk about carbon tax, but you know the deal. The topic is entirely up to you, and you can join us right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 4. Daisy, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you this morning?
Doing okay. How about you?
Got a little bit more information than I had when I was talking to you the other day about the phones in Brookside. Right. It's still going to be a while before they're fixed, but the telephone company are working on it. I got to talk to a technician actually in Marystown, and he talked to his manager and called me back. The manager wouldn't call me, but there is a contractor who has been hired. New lines are going to be run from Boat Harbour to Brookside, and he said the work should be completed within within weeks rather than months. He didn't say a couple of weeks, but he said weeks rather than months. But he couldn't give me an exact date when things was going to start. I guess they have to get it organized. But there is a contract let for the repairs, so that is great news.
It is good. It would be even more beneficial if weeks had a formal definition. Like
exactly,
2, 3,
it would.
Because weeks can be 52.
It can be, but he said weeks, not months.
Okay. So I guess that brings it down to 3 max then.
Yeah, technically. But having said that, I'm sure that if there's nothing visible in a couple of weeks, you'll probably be getting more calls.
Probably so, and I've gone through some of my friends and people I know who know people at Bell, and I can get all kinds of contact information for sales guys and some executive level guys. I'm having a devil of a time getting on the service side, the tech side. I don't know why. Yep. Maybe they're avoiding because they don't have an answer for us.
And when you call the tech line, they don't, the repair line, they don't know the information. Their computer system is not being updated. They should have, if this actual technician that I spoke to in Marystown could find that information out when he spoke to his boss. When people are calling into the support line, into the repair line, they should be able to look into the computer and say, oh, yes, it's being worked on. A contract has been let, and the repairs are, forthcoming. But instead they're saying, it's going to be fixed 8 o'clock this evening, which everybody knows it's not. If the lines need to be replaced, it's not going to be fixed in a day.
No, of course. And I mean, sometimes a bit of patience is required, but when we're talking about an outage that's persisted since the 15th of March with zero answers forthcoming, then of course people's patience will run thin or if not evaporate. Yep,
exactly. But anyway, I called you to let you know because I know people listen to your show, and I figured that was the easiest way to let people know that a contract has been let for. The lines are going to be replaced between Boat Harbour and Brookside, but as for time frame, I can only say what he said. It's going to be weeks rather than months, so hopefully it is.
Well, hopefully so. I appreciate the update, Daisy.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to do this.
My pleasure. Stay in touch. Let us know when you get some more info.
I will. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Ryan Cleary. You're on the air.
Morning, Patty. To you and your listeners. Thanks for taking the call.
No problem.
Patty, I'm calling in this morning about the price of snow crab and the fact that we're heading into another tie-up. My particular concern is a follow-up on comments that were made by Earl McCurdy and the actions of the Andrew Furey government, from my perspective, which must be explained. So, Patty, McCurdy, as you know, he's the former head of the FFAW, and he's one of 3 members who sits on the price-setting panel that was appointed by the province. So the panel went with the ASP formula earlier this week and a $2.60 a pound price to start for snow crab, but it wasn't unanimous, as you probably heard. McCurdy disagreed. So in his dissenting opinion, McCurdy pointed out to an alarming action that was taken by the Furey administration. So what happened was McCurdy said the price-setting panel was put in a straitjacket at the 11th hour. They're his words, and he was speaking in terms of the snow crab formula. So on March 26th, now that was 4 days after the protests outside Confederation Building ended, the Furey government quietly made amendments to the Fishing Industry Collective Bargaining Act regulations. Now, I say quietly because no one knew about them. So the changes to the regulations compelled the panel to use final offer selection to choose a crab pricing formula. That meant the panel was forced to choose one formula or the other, the unions or the ASP, and nowhere in between. Now, as McCurdy pointed out, that's despite the fact that government should have known that the formulas would be too complex submissions, and the two formulas would be based on entirely different approaches to a pricing formula, and they were, Patty. So what that means is that the change in regulation meant that the panel had to accept one of the submissions in its entirety. And what that comes down to is the panel's hands were tied in terms of any leeway in choosing elements of both formulas. Now, McCurdy pointed to applying interest arbitration to the pricing formula as well as conditions of sale. So what all this leads to is some questions that I have, some questions that need to be put to the Fury government. So why did the Fury government tie the panel's hands at the 11th hour? Why wasn't it made public that the regulations under the Act would be changed? Why were those changes made in secret? And my final question is, what is the Premier's definition of free enterprise? He never did answer that question, Patty. But I can tell you this, though, for a fact. It's not final offer selection. It's certainly free enterprise is not final offer selection in the choice of two crab pricing formulas, choosing one over the other in its entirety. That is not free enterprise. So
yeah, but I think, if you expand what that definition means, and like many things, it means something different to different people. But if, for instance, I heard John Efford say that if there's an outside buyer that he's been in contact with that is willing to offer $3.25 a pound, then even if there's just a bottom floor price of $2.60 set as of today here for whenever the season opens, it's supposed to open on the 6th. We don't know when the boys are going to go on the water. So the free enterprise concept still exists inside this flawed pricing model. My understanding was last year the agreement between the association, the FFAW, and the province was if we're going to see this avoided in the following snow crab season, which is now, that there would be some different process taken. Because if the quiet part was said out loud last year that $2.20 was not the right price simply because they had to pick one or the other, then how do we find ourselves in the same predicament? So the hollow victory that was achieved a couple of Fridays ago has now been handcuffed or hamstrung with this, once again, flawed process. Now, I do think it's offset in some form with $3.25 being the potential for an outside buyer, which apparently includes ice and bait and EI contributions, what have you. So there's still something to be said here. What I'm not really so sure about is, and I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of the industry, but let's just say, and full well, the ASP in this province, they put their feelers out in other parts of the country and or the continent to see what people might be willing to pay for the crab. And if they heard $3.25 and still submitted $2.60, they may have inadvertently created a whip for their own tail. Now, it remains to be seen exactly how this unfolds, but for the life of me, I can't understand why the fundamentals of not necessarily the earn or bury sliding scale process, but if the pricing process came down to a formula introduced by both that said the percentage of what the market will bear will go to the harvesters, the percentage of what the market will bear will go to the processors. But that wasn't it. We're right back to where we started last year, which consequently led to 6 weeks of tie-up.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat myself, Patty, but the Fury government has got to it's got to be made to answer the question, why did it change the regulations so that the panel's hands were tied in choosing one formula or the other formula, nothing in between? Why was that quietly done? Why was that secretly done? It's not good enough, Patty. I think the Fury government, from my perspective, it has a certain arrogance towards the fishery. It either doesn't understand it or choose to ignore the concerns of the inshore fleet. Maybe it comes down to the fact that we've got a towny premier who doesn't understand the fishery. Now, I don't want that to be a low blow, but the question must be asked, does the premier understand the fishery or not? Does he understand that the lack of competition, the fact that there is no competition, is just as important as the price? But up to this point, he's chosen to ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, even the way they've gone with the buyer's license, I mean, it's a straight-up deterrent to keep some plants floating. And I mean, I know that snow crab is different than other species because there is a time frame for getting crab to plants and getting crab to market, very much unlike some of the groundfish, where if we're talking head off and gutted, they can move that product around quite easily. Now, it comes with an additional expense, but it's a vastly different species than if we're talking about crab. So I don't know how this is going to land, but I do know that what felt like a victory for the harvesters is no longer that. And the concept of tie-ups and protests are going to be upon us within hours or days.
Yeah, the last thing, too, Patty, is the fact that Loveless has already said there's going to be a review at the end of this year to all issues related to the fishery, including harvesting, processing capacity, competition, corporate control. I don't think that goes far enough, Patty. I think that there should be a federal and provincial government review, both, including financial agreements between companies and harvesters. These controlling agreements, these financial agreements, they need to be investigated. These ties that lock inshore harvesters to companies, to the cartel, they have to be broken. It's no good to have a review with just the provincial government responsible for processing. The federal government responsible for harvesting also has to be included. It has to be a sweeping review. Loveless doesn't go far enough.
I appreciate the time. We're going to try to get the minister on because the ultimate question here is why were the rules changed at the 11th hour? Because everyone was under the understanding is that there would be a market formula put forward by both that would talk about percentage of the market price and then come up with a price, as opposed to the same old thing. One price from one side, one price from the other side, a three-person panel that gets split 2-1, and we pick one. I mean, even conceptually speaking, doesn't matter if you're in the fishing industry or otherwise, for that to be the way the price is set for raw material of anything is bizarre.
Yes, sir, Patty. If you could put that to Elvis Loveless or to the Premier, that would be much appreciated. I'm sure the audience would love to hear that answer.
I'm going to try to get it, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Just got some interesting information. Makes sense. Is that we're talking about the 11th hour change to the price setting panel going back to the way it was and now currently still is for setting the price on every species, including snow crab. It's not necessarily under the auspices of the Minister of Fisheries. It's under the Minister of Labour, which is Bernard Davis. So I guess we've got 3 people that we can ask that question of. Okay, let's keep rolling, though. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to Connie Pike with Miles for Smiles. Connie, you're on the air.
Morning, Patty. Hope you're well.
Not too bad. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. Some high numbers again this month, past March month. I'm generally waiting, as you know, to the end of the month to make sure that we've included everything that may surface during any given month in terms of child abuse cases in our provincial courts. And again, for March, in all 10 courtrooms, we had cumulative numbers of 349 cases of child abuse being heard, 70 offenders, and of course, I keep mentioning the most disturbing part of that is we're only seeing 10% of cases that ever get reported, and even less than that that go to court. So we're talking thousands of cases every month in our province.
Do we have, we've got these monthly updates, and I think it's helpful to paint a picture of just how dire that issue is in the province and how prevalent it is. Do we have any idea about how many of these cases make it to the end and we have guilty convictions put in place?
I really don't. That doesn't come through in terms of convictions. There's no conviction rates stated in the court dockets. But I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that there's probably a 40 to 50% conviction rate. I can check with people in the know and see if that might be accurate. That's kind of high, but I think when it comes to child abuse cases, they are taken more seriously, I believe, than, say, a case against an adult victim. So we'll see what happens. A lot of the cases with adult victims would be he said, she said, but in child abuse cases, very often they're supporting evidence. So that's why I'm giving that higher number. But again, it's just a guess. I sent along some information there for you, and a blog that I'm going to be putting on Miles for Smiles page if anybody would like to check it out. And again, I'm going to reiterate about the ills, I guess, of social media technology for children. And Patty, there's a list included in that blog of some very disturbing things that we found through our studies and surveys. And the ones that I'd really like to highlight today, because these issues lead to vulnerable children, or children being more vulnerable, I should say. And then that leads to more of the incidents that we're talking about, because children are getting groomed all the time. One of the statistics, as a matter of fact, is that every 2 minutes, a child is being prepared for sexual exploitation. And that is really alarming, or should be, to people. A couple of other things that are of note. About 50% of teenagers ages 13 to 17 said that using social media makes them feel worse. Online predators can bond with your child in 8 minutes. 8 minutes, less time than it takes for you to drink a cup of coffee. Teens who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media, they double the risk of poor mental health outcomes. And of course, with each hour or two that you're on social media and using technology, you're increasing your vulnerability for a number of issues. And a couple of other things I'll mention. The average age of recruitment into sex trafficking in Canada is 13 years of age. And since 2010, that's 14 short years, because really Facebook began just 20 years ago. I mean, it seems like a lifetime ago in many respects, but it's just 20 short years. But since 2010, teen suicide amongst girls has increased 64%, and depression amongst teens has increased almost 150%. We really need to look at these numbers, know that they apply to children here in the province, and demand more of lawmakers. We do all kinds of things to protect our children, with seatbelts in cars, with certain specifications for using booster seats. There are certain age and height and weight restrictions. We look for adults. We need seatbelts. We need traffic signs. We need speed limits, and the rules and regulations around cigarette and alcohol use for young children. I mean, heck, when you go to a carnival, there's even a height restriction for children getting on certain rides. Like, we do all of these things to protect our children from harm, but there are no laws right now regarding social media platforms. And I will speak to anyone who might be listening with influence in the federal government. An online harms bill, Bill C-63, was introduced by our federal government earlier this year, as a matter of fact, in February. But the sad reality is it can take years for bills to pass. 6, 8, 10 years for a bill to pass.
That bill has a problem, though. It really, truly does. Because if the concept is to protect children online, then I think we can all get on board with that. But some of the add-ons to that bill are really, I think, a bit of government overreach. And I mean, who gets to be the arbiter of truth? Who gets to be the arbiter of accuracy, as opposed to people being allowed to voice an opinion? Now, there's an opinion that can go too far, and I think we all know it when we see it. But that bill just had a few too many things that made it ham-fisted, as opposed to the real narrow focus required for online protections. And it's amazing. I see 4 school boards in the province of Ontario who are suing TikTok and Meta, which is, of course, Facebook and Instagram. And people are saying, how dare we sue these free enterprises like these social media platforms? Their algorithms are well understood, they are unfair, and they are absolutely targeting children. I mean, the rush of endorphins when I get my picture liked or my post liked, and then consequently the ability for a digital pile-on, which is far more dramatic and drastic than it is for an incident face-to-face in a school, it just makes it a much different kettle of fish. I can't believe people are pushing back against the concept of protecting children online. I mean, they're all about protecting children in school, but they're not about protecting them online, where the students and children spend more time online than they do in school. So it's a really strange one. And that bill, they should send that back to committee and come up with a tighter, more narrow focused piece of legislation. And if there's requirements for amendments down the line before we get into the whole freedom of expression conversation, then maybe that's an opportunity somewhere else. But right now, the requirement to do it quickly and efficiently and effectively is right in front of us. It's not the 11th hour. We're past that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the bill does need to be streamlined. We need to look at that. We need something right now that demands greater accountability and, safer products from these giants, these social media giants. There's nothing in place really for the protection of children. It's such an addictive behavior, and again, I'll mention that anything over 3 hours a day doubles the risk of poor mental health for children, and that should be a wake-up call for all of us. I just don't understand how we're not taking this issue much more seriously and striving to do better for our children. We're into those clicks, and it's not working for kids. It's just not.
Well, I tell you what, for a lot of adults, it's their infatuation with clicks. And if it's that way for an adult, you can only imagine what it's like for someone who's still in the development stage as a teenager. My goodness, it's anyway, connecting those dots should be fairly fundamental. Connie, I appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Okay. Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And just think about it. I know there's certainly plenty of adults that follow me and send notes at me, and I see their social media feeds, and some of it's really repetitive, and it's hive mind stuff, right? It's getting that like or getting that repost really does drive people's addiction to social media platforms. And if it's that way for adults, then what do you think it is and the impact it would be for people who are young adults and or in their pre-teens? I mean, they live on it. You see it as much as I do. You look around at any collection of children, whether it be in the mall or at the rink or what have you. The phone is in my hand far too often, but it's in their hand all the time. And what are they doing? They're not necessarily navigating to see the J score from last night. No, some of them would be, but many of them are absolutely glued to their social media platforms. And it has an impact on attention span too. I mean, just think about it. TikTok being one of the most popular. It absolutely comes with a short attention span feature. Because you can watch a bunch of those videos in very short order, and I think that's manifested itself in real time outside of the digital world. What do you think? Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Good morning, Terry Bursey. You're on the air.
Oh, sorry, was that me?
That's you. If you're Terry Bursey, it's you.
I am. Sorry, I didn't think it would be prompted so soon. Yeah, hi. How are you today, Patty?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, Terry. How about you?
Oh, I can't complain at all. It's right now it's Autism Acceptance Month, and our community is really celebrating our month of acceptance right now. And so everybody, I think, in the autistic community, for the most part, is in high spirits about everything.
And yesterday was World Autism Awareness Day, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I might have to correct you there. It's moved on from that. It's actually Autism Acceptance Day now. And that's part of what I wanted to talk about online, on Openline today. But also, well, the first thing I wanted to do was congratulate and personally thank the various municipalities that have gone above and beyond to show this outpouring of support that was, I believe, from what I've observed, unprecedented. This year has been, there were so many communities and municipalities across the whole island and the big land too who had just gone above and beyond for Autism Acceptance Day and the start of Autism Acceptance Month as well. And that said, of course, there were many people in the autistic community who also felt that there were a lot of aspects to the celebrations and the overall outpouring of support that I had talked about that were off the mark and a little bit, for lack of a better word, outdated. And so a lot of that, I think, stems from just a lack of availability of information, which, people talk about nowadays everything being online. Anyone can pick up their phone and research anything at any time. But oftentimes when you do pick up your phone and research something, you're only getting a specific amount of information rather than the correct information that, specifically autism advocates have been fighting tooth and nail to bring about in regards to positive change over the past couple of decades. And one thing that we saw was that not only were people still referring to it as Autism Awareness Day, awareness being something typically reserved for diseases and illnesses, but there was also many elements to that were not entirely acceptable anymore to the autism community, in that it not only marginalized us or flirted with the line to marginalization, but it also showed a sort of a lack of understanding or a lack of listening, ironically enough, on what is supposed to be our day to have our voices heard. One example of this, and I won't name any municipalities specifically, but there were many people who were lighting it up blue. And now Lighting It Up Blue is a campaign that I believe was started by Autism Speaks decades ago. And Lighting It Up Blue is problematic for many reasons, and we understand completely that there were good intentions involved, and that people put their heart and souls into these kind of events, and that they did not mean to hurt anybody or to show any lack of understanding or to shut down anybody's views within the autistic community. But Lighting It Up Blue is problematic primarily because it showcases a gender bias towards autism that no longer exists. Science has proven that autism is no longer a boy's disorder, or is something that affects both females, males, all genders. It doesn't matter. And so that was part of the reason why Light It Up Blue was started from for that campaign, but also because blue has actually since then, for a long time now, actually been not associated with autism at all, but actually with Huntington's disease. So there's a little bit of an error in that regard, in that it's used now to promote awareness for an actual disease, Huntington's disease. Purple, I believe, being for juvenile Huntington's. And the colors that are associated with autism now are typically we say red instead, Light It Up Red, which is supposedly inclusive for all genders or all peoples regardless of anything else. And some people also choose to go yellow as a way to specifically support female, non-binary and gender fluid individuals who are autistic. So it's, there were things like that, as well as calling it Autism Awareness Day as opposed to Acceptance Day, which, autism advocates have worked very hard these last couple of decades to make that positive change. And it's a change that elsewhere we do see very well, but here, not so much. Here, things are still a little bit behind in that regard. And advocates are doing a lot to try to amend this. For example, myself and some colleagues are rolling out an event through Central starting in late spring, early summer, in which we're actually going to be visiting many communities in Central to offer an informational event that is meant to kind of be a crash course to catch a lot of people up on a lot of the issues surrounding autism that have or attitudes surrounding autism that have changed over the past couple of decades, and so that there might be a lot less of this going on in the future. So I didn't want to be the guy who came in to nitpick about it, because, as I said, as I started out with, the actual show of support was amazing. And you could tell that people's hearts and souls are into this. It's just, often like getting a gift on Christmas that you didn't really quite like, or that might have even been counter to what you like. The thought counts as well. And so you still smile at the person who gave you the gift, and you still say thank you and Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays or what have you. But at the same time, a little bit of communication could have maybe made for a much more apt and better present.
Fair enough. And it's not for me to nitpick either, because in the autism community, if you thought that red was better than that checkerboard fair ball, and if you think that red has a more inclusive flair, and you mentioned purple, which I think is also for pancreatic cancer. So the way the colors have been used, sometimes I've seen a lot of overlap, which has made it maybe somewhat confusing for others. But when I heard awareness, I went right down the road of awareness meaning understanding, knowing more about the spectrum, because the spectrum is broad. If you've met someone that's on the spectrum, you've met exactly that, one person on the spectrum, because it's all so different. And then, when I think we talk about complex neurodivergent issues like this, people talk about cause, and they sometimes overlay cause with increased risk. So I think that's some of the things that I've tried to figure out and to understand. And I've been working with the Autism Society for quite a long time here, not as much in recent years, but years back I did it all the time. So I think that's how I took awareness, because it wanted me to think that I wanted to know more. And a better understanding leads to better opportunities for acceptance. That's how I heard it. But if acceptance is the better word for the community, so be it. Let's use exactly that. And I did not see that updated when I had a look online the other day, knowing that the 2nd of April was Autism Day. I still use awareness. And that's what I saw on Google as well. So I don't even think they've updated the inclusion of a new word to better reflect what the community needs and wants.
Yeah, and these changes, that's part of what a lot of the dismay within the autism community comes from, in that advocates have worked so hard, and elsewhere you see these changes implemented somewhat strongly, firmly. But then here there's a little bit more play, and like you were saying, sometimes things can mean different things to different people. Yeah. Some people might look at awareness and autism awareness as simply being informed and aware of so many different aspects of autism, or enough about it that you could have whatever positive outlook on it that you can have. But now the thing about what made the change is that awareness is something that's almost specifically reserved for illnesses or diseases, as if autism were somehow inherently bad. To be autistic would be somehow a setback. But science has proved that autism isn't an illness; it's a neurotype. It's simply a natural variation in the human consciousness, natural variation in the human brain structure that society would actually be lost without. It's not so much a setback or a deficit as it is a double-edged sword. You look at every major world mover in history. Most of them have been autistic and continue to be autistic. Bill Gates, Elon Musk, the list goes on. Without autism, it would be trying to get rid of autism like Autism Speaks likely wants to do still. It would be the equivalent of lobotomizing humanity. Science would slow to a crawl. Industry would slow to a crawl. We're not to completely laud autistics over any other neurotype, but we are a vital thread in humanity's tapestry rather than a blemish on it. And so when you use language like awareness, it paints autism negatively from the start, or at least for a great many of us, especially if we happen to be autistic, because this is something that's brought up within the autistic community. And so when the autistic community votes and our advocates put out this change to make the transition from awareness, which paints it, at least according to us, and I might argue that that's what matters most, to actually make that change to awareness, or to acceptance, because acceptance means that it is essentially okay in every aspect to be autistic. And the vast majority of autistics worldwide, especially once we reach some sort of level of comfort and control of our environments, completely are comfortable and happy being autistic. We don't see it as a detriment. We don't see it as much of anything else. Of course, there's a learning curve through adolescence, and many parents would argue that they have incredible struggles depending on how much they want to alter their child from being autistic and themselves and happy to being as non-autistic as possible. That there might be some hardship there as well. But for the most part, what the autistic community is saying is that we are here. We've always been here. We're not going to go anywhere, and you'd probably be a little bit lost without us in the grand scheme of things in regards to humanity as a species as a whole.
Understood.
And so that transition to acceptance is a way to let the public know that We are absolutely whole. There is nothing wrong with us. We are meant to be who we are. There was no better version of us that could have been born, because we were meant to be born exactly as we are, and that it's good to be who we are. And so that's the change that advocates have fought so hard for, and we would really love it. We would absolutely celebrate the people who would take initiative to make those kind of changes with us, with the community who have fought so hard to make those changes.
I appreciate the time, Terry. You know, there's some posthumous diagnoses that have been applied too. I mean, Einstein, Newton, amongst others. I think the fellow who created Pokemon is actually diagnosed on the spectrum as well. So, yes,
Correct.
Absolutely. Nikola Tesla, I believe, was posthumously diagnosed based on behavior and patterns and the like. I appreciate your time today, Terry.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you listening.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the president of the FFAW is in the queue. That's Greg Priddy. Paul wants to give you some warning about hidden fees while online shopping as well. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the president of the FFAW, Greg Priddy. Greg, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay, sir. How about you?
Well, like anybody in the crab industry, we've all had better days than this.
No question. Let's start at the very beginning here. What felt like a victory for the harvesters and consequently the union a couple of Fridays ago has been eroded in some form. So with the change to the price-setting formula, first question, was it as simple as they reverted back to last year's process? And who's ultimately the minister responsible? Is it Lovelace or Davis? Because it does it fall under Labour or Fisheries?
Labour on the price-setting panel, yes.
Okay, so is it as fundamental as the process this year is the same as last year, even though there was agreement to change it?
There was the issue as it unfolded was there were 16 recommendations, I believe, in the Blackwood report. The province didn't move on any of those until last Monday, and that was yeah. So that was a surprise to everybody in dealing with the negotiating, both the panel, both ourselves, and ASP. The way the province outlined how they proceed with a choice of a formula from ASP or ourselves. Ideally, of course, why wouldn't they adapt the Blackwood formula? Because the province spent a lot of money and they gathered a lot of very good information, and it showed that Blackwood report showed what was wrong with the industry in many cases, what needs to be fixed, but most importantly, it gave us a formula that actually did a very good job on the sharing arrangement. They came up with their own formula that actually enhanced the sharing to harvesters. So in bargaining, we went pretty well straight down that line, a couple of deviations, of course, but we wanted to access that sharing arrangement. ASP went entirely the other way. They came up with a formula that I guess what they said in the panel at the panel hearing was, this is something to get the fishery going, but it was deficient in so many ways. And I'll just stop at this one, Paddy. I'll pass it back to you. The difference in start price from our position and at the ASP position, at their 260, our 283, was approximately $29 million in startup money. So there's the problem. Why would the province go down the road of examining what was wrong with the industry and then completely ignore it and go to some system that bore no relationship to the market? So there's where we are. It's we're right back to, I think you referenced it already, we're right back to where we were last year. We have a price there that harvesters, obviously they know the system and they know they're being shorted by this panel situation. So here's where we are. It's a tough spot to be in at this point in April. So, and your position was $2.83. Is there something in place now to see some sort of scale reflective of market realities? Like last year we went from $2.20 and there was some increase over time. Is there something formally in place, or is that a week-by-week battle? Well, the formula is in place as the ASP formula. The ASP formula is in place. So that's what they picked. That's what they have. That's what's causing the problem here. It bears no relationship to the market.
But I was told that
that
ASP put in a price that had no background with market pressures or reflections like an Erner Barry. They simply just plucked the price and said, this is what we think we're going to pay and this is enough. But you're telling me there's more market background to justify, so to speak, that price?
No, there's nothing to justify their price. Nothing. Zero. It's not related to anything. In fact, there's caps in there. I mean, if harvesters, just imagine this, if harvesters accepted that ASP formula, they'd be fishing with a maximum cap, no matter where the market went. They'd be fishing at 37% of the market price. So that's insanity. Well, nobody's going to do that, but yet that's where we are. So that's just a portion of what's wrong with that. It's not based on anything. It's not based on the market reality. So in essence, what's happened here, the panel has picked a formula that actually diverts away from the true market price. So I guess what they're saying internally is our harvesters are not worth the market price. That's where they are. Now, McCurdy did a dissent. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's I can flick it over to you. It's well worth a read, but it's a very sharp, distinct dissent, which just shows how ludicrous that ASP formula is.
Yeah, please send it over. And no disrespect to Mr. McCurdy, but he can write a well-worded dissent all he likes. But the fact of the matter is, if the process is 3-person panel, 2-1 vote, pick one price or the other, dissent is irrelevant. It's just putting your words and your thoughts to paper, which won't carry the day for the harvesters or the union. So please do send it. But until the process changes, we can all be in dissent and up in arms and frustrated and protest and scream epithets at each other. But the process is the key here. It's the outcome is obviously unfortunate if you're a fish harvester, not so much if you're a processor, but I can't believe for the life of me that we couldn't find ourselves at a place where there was some meaningful adjustment to the process. Because where are we now? Just like I said, back where we started. What's going to be the outcome? Protests and tie-ups. Not that you can lead it based on an arbitration last year, but that's happening, isn't it?
But Patty, you're 100% right. I mean, what happened is, we went down a long road, which showed how to fix this industry, how to increase the market share, and the majority panel, tossed it out. I mean, that's the problem. That's the issue. That's the pickle we're in now. So we're right back to, we're right back to a situation where we have, we don't, obviously, people are pissed with this. They don't want to fish. Why would you and lose your shirt? I mean, people are hurting in this province, and we're right back to square one. So there's where we are. It's absolutely. Yesterday I met with all the crab fleet chairs yesterday, and one of the themes running through the meeting was the disbelief that we could look at this Blackwood formula, which was written, by the way, by representatives of the industry, processors and union and an independent chair, which showed us the way forward. And we couldn't be handy enough or smart enough to go down that road. Instead of that, they turned the clock back to a system that we already had in place from 98 to 2006. And it didn't work then, and it can't work now. So there's no lessons learned here. I mean, it's an incredibly stupid position to be in on this industry.
Now, I don't know how it's going to unfold. I don't think anybody does. But I've heard people say that they've been in contact with outside buyers floating $3.25. If that's the case, there's going to be a significant percentage of the crowd that leaves the province, possibly, which will have an impact on some of the people you represent in the plants, might have a long-term implication for the viability of some of the processors. And in addition, I'll get your thoughts on this before we soon have to go. At some point, there's going to be a real knock or a tarnish on the province's reputation as a reliable partner, because anyone in business, regardless of the industry, if you see instability, then that's going to, whether it be consciously or subconsciously, influence where you turn for partnerships, relationships, and where you want to buy your product.
Patty, you're 100% right. It's always in our mind. We're always cognizant of that going forward. I just wish the processors had the same opinion you have of the reputation of this industry. They had a different way to go on this one. They could have aligned themselves more with or even adapt some of the issues on the Blackwood formula. They chose to go in the opposite direction and hope that they'd get a fishery. Well, they know the difference. So here we are. So we'll have to deal with it. And but I hope these parties come to their senses, because we need to get this fishery going. We got crab. We had a great increasing market. We got no inventory. The trends are great. Even our, the pessimists are saying this is going to be a much better year. Let's get at that. Let's get at the other species like cod and capelin. Let's have a very good year. We have the potential to do that. And by the way, that's why we started bargaining in December, to get this thing done and on the way. But it takes two to tango, doesn't it? It takes two to tango. And our formula is out in public. You know exactly what it is. And all it did, Patty, the thrust of it was to do a fair market share to our harvesters. And they couldn't go with it. They went the other way. So here's where we are.
Yeah, I'll try to get Mr. Lauder on as well, because I'd like to hear from them regarding the thought process and what it means long term. But I appreciate your time this morning, Greg.
All the best, Patty. Thanks.
You too. Bye-bye. Greg Purdy is the president at the FFAW. And, I mean, if you read the fisheries forum on Facebook, for instance, which I do sometimes, it's not only the fractured relationship between the processors and the harvesters, there's also plenty of fracture. Mr. Purdy acknowledges this and understands it, just inside the dues-paying rank and file of the union itself. Boy, I think we're in for a pretty remarkable few days and weeks here as they try to figure this out. Let's take a break. Paul, you're next to talk about some hidden fees online. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Wade Locke. You're on the air.
Sorry for that. Took me by surprise. Thank you.
No problem. What's on your mind this morning, Wade?
I just want to let your listeners know that we're putting off a public discussion and presentation of the change or the evolution of economic well-being for individuals and for fiscal well-being tonight. It's open to the public. It's free. And we will look at how things have evolved in Newfoundland from the early 20s right up to the current day in terms of what we believe to be the important indicators of fiscal and economic well-being.
So inside that envelope, is there anywhere on the agenda that includes things like resources, specifically hydro? Because one of the things that has haunted many people in this province and the ongoing negotiations regarding 2041, is there going to be any sort of breakdown there, Wade? Because I think some people see it as some sort of panacea when I don't think it is.
We will address green energy and what we believe to be the potential for green energy in terms of as a panacea for the problems that we see. We will give both Doug May and myself will speak for half an hour each, and then we will open the floor for general discussion from anybody who wants to criticize, comment, or provide any other assessment they feel to do so. But we have gone through this, taken months to do. We've gone through and looked at all of the issues that we think are important, and we will give an honest assessment that people can agree with or not agree with about all the issues that we're aware of, including oil, including hydro, including Melcor, including all those kind of things. And it'll take place at the Elks Club. It's open to the public. It's 19 Carpathian Road. It'll start at 7 and finish at 9. We try to be respectful of people's time. And we hope that this will help people be able to have a more informed debate about issues. I think that's our hope. Like, we're both retired individuals now, so we don't do many of these kind of things anymore, but we thought this was worthwhile doing given the 75th anniversary.
It's one thing to do historical reflection on how we got to where we are today. How do you navigate things like the uncertainty? Specifically, you just mentioned the oil industry. You've heard from the federal minister, and the government may change hands, so that might change the entire outlook on fossil fuels here in this country. But, when Stephen Guilbeault says to get an oil project approved in the future is going to be very, very difficult, I don't know exactly what he means by that. I think he can translate that to the Beta Nord was the last one. So how do you look down the path when we talk about peak oil and possibility for approvals here when there are so many grey areas? In fact, there's more grey than anything else.
There are gray areas, and what is clear is that in the longer term, medium and longer term, the demand for oil will be going down, and its contribution to the provincial treasury will be going down. In the short term, with the payout from Hebron, they'll have additional revenues. They saw this budget recently they put out. They're expecting about a 2/3 or 67% increase in oil royalties this year. And so those are big numbers, and we will take people through what oil has meant to the province in terms of the fiscal implications and what it means to people otherwise, right? So we are well aware of issues around green energy, and we're well aware of issues around oil, and we're well aware of issues around fiscal kinds of considerations. And we think it's important for people to have an informed discussion about these kinds of issues, whether they agree or disagree with us. That's irrelevant. Or from our perspective, it's relevant. It's not your perspective. I'm just saying from my own perspective. We want to foster a discussion and facilitate people's understanding.
Fair enough. And just as a tangent, one thing regarding oil is that you might not be directly, on the benefit side of oil, because of course it's a common shared resource. We all benefit from royalties and tax-based expansion, what have you. But one thing it's always done, let's just say Equinor announces in the near future, we're going ahead with Beta Nord. It turbocharges the housing business all of a sudden, which has lots of implications and added chaos to what's already a chaotic market. Wade, give the details one more time. Where are the wins?
It's tonight between 7 and 9 at the Elks Club, which is, my understanding, is 19 Carpathian Road. And it's open to the public. Doug will speak for half an hour, and then I'll speak for half an hour, and then we'll throw it open for questions, comments, and whatever may come at that point.
I appreciate the time. Thanks, Wade.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, Paul, you've been a patient man. We appreciate that. It's Hidden Fees right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 2. Paul, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
Oh, not too bad.
Great.
A little bit frustrated, but overall doing well.
I understand that.
The reason I'm calling, I said yesterday, I said my mother engaged me to do some online shopping and get her a new iPad. So I went through all the normal big box stores and online platforms for shopping. I found the proper iPad that she wanted, and it was on sale, good price. In the process, it asked me for my postal code so that it would determine shipping charges. And it showed up free shipping. So perfect. I made the purchase, and it all went through best kind. So while I had that transaction completed, I said, well, I'll do some shopping for myself. Same business. I go in, I purchase 2 items. I look at them with my postal code, free shipping. It wasn't until after I submitted my credit card that the invoice showed up, and I had $25 shipping fee plus HST added to my bill. So all of a sudden, my deal is no longer a good deal. So I looked at their policy, and he says, no, you cannot do a return. So I got on the phone to a customer service. This is like within 10 minutes of it and submit, and I got a person on their call center, and he guaranteed me that, yes, it would be canceled, and I received an email saying that. Shortly after, I received a second email saying, no, it cannot be canceled. You can return it, but then again, I'm still stuck with the $25 shipping fees.
So when you clicked the old add to cart, did it not give you on your screen a breakdown of what you were paying inside the total?
Not until the credit card went in.
I see. Very good. See, that's the trick, isn't it? You don't get a chance to see the summary breakdown and final tally until you give them the vital information of your credit card.
Yeah. And I went back after and said, did I not see this right? I went back and my postal code was correct. It tells me what part of Newfoundland I'm in. And both times I went back and looked at both items, and it said free shipping. So...
yeah,
I want to get that out there to other people to make sure what you're doing, because, like you said, when you add on 25 plus tax, that takes away from any savings that you thought you might have had there, right?
Understood. I'd also add to it, if you're ordering food or groceries with some of the most popular online apps, that probably increases the overall cost 15 to 30%. I'll go a step further. If you're planning on ordering, like you did, an iPad for your mother, have a Google around what some of the hidden fees that you should be aware of before you go ahead and click and enter in your credit card info. Lots of helpful tips out there about what to be aware of.
Absolutely. But the funny thing is that the iPad that I purchased for her had no shipping fees. That's coming free of charge.
Yep.
Of shipping.
Yep.
So just a buyer beware. It's frustrating, like you said. I think it's being shipped from St. John's out to here, where I live, and within 10 minutes they said that no, it's already shipped. Seems a bit far-fetched to me.
Yeah, I don't know about the veracity of the timelines, but the buyer beware tip that you gave out this morning is helpful.
For sure. All right. So that's all, Paddy. I want to get that out there so that when you're looking at those online deals, make sure you can, before you hit that submit button, that you can see the breakdown of any charges that's being added to you.
Yeah, that's just good business, and it's fair dealings with your customers. Paul, I appreciate your time and your patience this morning. Thanks a lot.
All right, cheers. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Rod Pike. You're on the air. Hi, Rod.
Hello.
Hi there.
No, I'm not. It's Rodney.
Okay, Rodney, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm a fisherman, but anyway, I haven't. I'm just talking about the price. The price this year. I cannot see why. We got to leave $29 million on the table. With a small quota like myself, I made $26,000 last year in the fishery. That's to run my enterprise too, and that's to pay people to help me. So I don't know how in God's world, they expect people to do it, making that kind of money. This year, the crab is worth around $38,000. But I mean, if it was $280, that would give me an extra $3,000 or $3,500 to work with, especially when bait is going to be up to $3 a pound. Your fuel has gone up to around $1.70 a liter. Your license is $1,000. Just got an increase in my insurance bill for my boat is almost $3,500 compared to 24 or 27 last year. So, expenses, but it's not much. It's not much coming in.
Yeah, so I don't know what your individual quota will be and what kind of crew you would have in place. So the difference between 260 and 283, for some people that might sound like pittance, but when we're talking about thousands of pounds, of course, it adds up very, very quickly. Would you be able to, for instance, what's the break-even number for you? Do you know? Is it 270 or is it 275 or what is it?
No, we should be getting around $3. That's the best way to do anything. You've got something to work with in $3. I got a quota of 15,000 or close on. I mean, that's $45,000. So, I mean, you can entice somebody to come fish with you. You can give them 15% or something. But, I mean, I had a gentleman with me for 11 years, and I had to send him to the fish plant last year. And now he's not. Now I can't get him to come back again. So, there's just nothing there.
I've heard a couple of harvesters since yesterday tell me that in conversation with outside buyers from out of province, they're talking about the possibility to fetch $3.25 a pound. So if that's the case, will you be even considering landing and selling to the local processor if the possibility is for someone to pay you $3.25? I think the obvious answer is of course.
Well, I have no other choice because I got a smaller boat. I haven't got RSW boats. I only got 15,000. That's not. And somebody got 250 or 300,000 or 150,000. They got the quantity. Okay, yeah. We haven't. That's what inshore is.
So I guess the ultimate question will be for everybody, regardless of the size of their enterprise, regardless of how leveraged they are with the banks and all the other moving parts here, at 260 come February the 6th, April the 6th, are you going on the water or no?
Nope, staying home. Nope, especially when we're leaving $29 million on the table. So who's going to profit all that $29 million? It's not going to be the fishermen.
How do you plan on servicing your whatever bills you may owe if you're not going to fish for whatever you can get?
Well, I just had to do a few odd jobs around.
Okay.
That's the only thing that's keeping me in this industry now. I mean, it's a bit of carpenter work, or a gentleman down the road wants a bit of painting done or something. I have no other choice to do it to keep going. I mean, there's nobody wants my license now. It's not worth very much. I mean, you're not getting no new entry people coming in because there's just too many barriers.
With all the various costs that you talk about, insurance and fuel and bait and everything else, at say even at $3, what's clear? Because we can do the math on how many thousands of pounds you have and at $3 a pound, but what would be the clear profit for you at $3?
Well, the time I pay my crew and I pay all my bills, you know, I'll bring home maybe, you know, $12,000 or $15,000 the time everything's paid out. And still not very much for a living.
What other species do you have a license for?
Well, I cod, capelin, lobster. But the only thing with the cod, you know, last year where there was, you know, they wouldn't buy no cod because they were still doing crab. And also then, you know, the capelin fishery wasn't a very good success. There was lots of capelin, but they had minimum buyers and minimum trucking because the crab was so late. So, you know, it kind of puts us in a damper again if we don't get the fishery on the go. But, I mean, you can't turn around and start the fishery and leave $29 million on the table. No way possible. No way possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned the cod and the capelin. That relationship, I think, deserves more conversation. DFO says as much as they've changed the way they measure the strength of the cod stock, even just because now they go from 1983 back to 1954, but that didn't put any more fish in the water, and they've got distinct concerns about the state of the capelin stock. You know, talk about the capelin maturing so much earlier, and consequently, when the first time they spawn, then they probably die. And so we've got to be careful, I think, with that capelin fishery. It's easy enough for me to say because it's not my money, not my livelihood on the line, but before we're long, we might fish one species to the jeopardy of another, and that one being cod. Anyway, I don't know if you want to comment on that before we say goodbye, Rodney?
Well, you know, you got 9 million seals, so they don't eat. You know, they're eating fish, they're eating salmon, they're eating capelin. Capelin is one of the biggest predators there. Well, the seals are the biggest predators there. You know, is eating. You know, imagine how much fish and capelin and herring and mackerel and fish that 9 million seals are eating.
Yeah, but that suggestion would imply that there's got to be some sort of cull of the seal, which I don't think there's the political appetite available, because the seal conversation is not new. If you go back to 1991, the number of seals out there was estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 million. Now we're talking about close on 8 million. So obviously it's had a detriment in the recovery of the cod stock, but conservatives and liberals alike have never had the stomach to call for a cull of the seals. I think we just got to change the way we even think and talk about seals. For starters, it's not about the hide and the meat anymore, it's about the oil. I think that's the way you get your foot in the door in the market, to be honest with you, because that's in demand. If you can produce a unique omega-3 oil, that's a vastly different conversation than, hey, it's an acquired taste, how about a flipper pie? Hey, how about some sealskin boots or a sealskin purse? That, you know, that always spoke to the very elite of the world, and I guess indigenous populations. But that omega-3 oil, I think that we lean on that, and let's see how the anti-seal crowd speak to something that they actually use themselves. Rodney, good to have you on the show, and hopefully this gets figured out, because I got a funny feeling this is going to get worse before it gets better.
No, you're right, sir. I think it is going to get worse, and I mean more worse. There's going to be, you know, something going on within the next few days. I mean, you just can't keep going like this. You know, you need it straightened away ASAP, and like I said, you can't put $29 million on the table. You know.
Yeah, I think you need to straighten away ASAY yesterday.
Okay, yeah.
Good to have you on, Rodney.
All right, thanks very much, Patty.
Welcome, sir. All the best.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Let's take a break for the newscast. When we come back, Polly wants to talk about Port to Port. Lloyd Parrott, who's the PC member for Terra Nova, wants to talk about the fishery. And Mark's there to talk about Tent City and how long it's been in play. Don't go away.
Nutrition, exercise, keeping the cold at bay. Whatever keeps you feeling great, the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show, Dave. Let's make engineering aware. Apparently we're off the air in various places, including out in CBS, apparently. Just saw that 5 seconds ago. Let's go to line number 4. So good morning to the PC member for Terra Nova. That's Lloyd Parrott. Lloyd, you're on the air.
Morning, Patty. How are you today?
Not too bad, thanks. How about you?
Oh, I'm good. Always well. Just wanted to call in today, and voice my displeasure and sadness, I guess, with what's happened with our fishery again this year. You know, it's been a total lack of leadership on behalf of the Premier and the Liberal government. And, you know, we got yet another report that came out 5 months ago in the Blackwood report that I guess because the Liberal government doesn't agree with it, they put it up on the shelves with the rest of the reports that they put out. And I'm shocked to hear that out of the 16 recommendations, the first time that they went to do anything when it was last Monday. It makes no sense. And, it's a complete disregard for an industry. It's a complete disregard for the men and women inside of that industry. And more specifically, I believe it's a complete disregard for rural Newfoundland and Labrador. And at some point, it has to stop.
What should be done?
Well, listen, you got the Premier yelling and screaming that he wants an emergency meeting with the Prime Minister to talk about carbon tax. So, if he doesn't feel that this fishery as a billion-dollar industry is as important right now as carbon tax, then he's obviously missed, pardon the pun, the boat. I would argue that there's no photo op in this forum, and that's why they haven't done it. But right now, government, harvesters, and processors should be sitting at a table having a conversation. And the reality of this is that it is too important to fail. And the longer we put it off, we seen the trickle-down effect last year from a processing standpoint when we tried to process crab late into the year. It affected what we've done with every single other species. And government, this is a failure. And I'd say, Patty, I also question where the federal MPs are on this. The silence kind of tells me that there may be some disagreement between the feds and the province on this, and that they're not probably as cozy or on side as they should be or ought to be. And we need to be putting our people ahead of, their internal priorities, and we've seen those priorities come to play on the 28th of March when they changed regulations.
And of course, there's people on both sides of this equation. But what role do we want the federal government to play? It's already bad enough the amount of responsibility and authority the feds have inside the fishery. People talk about custodial management and what have you. So, what do you want the feds to do regarding price?
Well, listen, our federal MPs, the people that represent the constituents in this province, should be speaking out against what the provincial government's doing right here. They don't always have to be on the same page. And if I disagree with someone inside my caucus, I got no problem saying it. So the federal MPs that represent people in rural Newfoundland ought to be speaking about this. I agree with you. We should have joint management. But here's one thing that this government should be looking at. This isn't an issue that happens every few years. It isn't an issue. We've seen this issue reoccur all the time. It's time for Premier Fury to show some leadership, and it's time for him to put an independent fisheries minister in place, one that can handle this fishery and one that is fighting for the men and women that are involved in it. And I'm not saying to fight against processors, I'm not saying to fight against Ottawa. I'm saying to fight for our fishery, an industry that's worth well over $1 billion that has zero representation from this Liberal government.
So what does an independent minister look like? Are you talking about someone who's unelected with a background in the fishery, or what does that mean?
No, I'm talking about the Ministry of Fisheries like we used to have before, an individual who would understand. Listen, I am not putting this back on Minister Lovelace. Minister Lovelace's portfolio is huge. There's a lot of things that get overlooked, and the day-to-day operation of this fishery right now has bubbled to the forefront. And if we look in an by-election that just happened, when the Premier's buddy got elected, he very quickly put him in a cabinet post. Now, again, I'm not saying that we didn't need a minister and a portfolio of housing, but what I am saying is that this issue here is important enough to have its own standalone minister and department, and one that looks for a way to grow this industry. We got $1.5 billion industry that should be a $5 billion industry. We've got the same issues recurring year after year, and yet they can't find any solutions for it. We got a report that came out from Mr. Blackwood that the government commissioned. I will add, the government asked for this report, and when the report came back and it didn't work for them, they didn't utilize it. So we've got some serious issues inside of government when it comes to the fishery.
I'm just curious about a better definition of what a standalone independent minister sounds like or looks like. Like, what does that mean? Because the Minister of Fisheries, like the Minister of Health or Education or Industry, Energy, Technology, will all be part of a cabinet, which is collective. So what does a standalone independent minister actually mean? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I would argue that he would have more time to deal with the issues. He'd have a better understanding of the issues. It would not take away from other departments. Right now we've got a minister. So for me, I would think that we would need a minister of fisheries and aquaculture, one that looks specifically after our marine sector. If we look at how other ministers operate and what their responsibilities are, we look at tourism, culture, and recreation. We get that. We're trying to grow that industry. We should have a standalone minister who has that as a responsibility solely, and he's trying to grow the industry, and they're trying to solve the problems. These problems Every year they've grown. They've gotten worse. The fishermen, they feel betrayed. They're not getting the support they need. And listen, I can give you examples, and there's lots of times when people, and I hear it from people inside of my own district. I've got 2 plants that applied to have an extension in their processing capabilities. Applied a year ago. They never heard anything until Monday. A year to do that, to go through that process. There's lots of people inside both sides of the House who've said they've reached out to the minister and they haven't received a response. Obviously, he's too busy. So perhaps we just need a minister who's responsible for fishery and aquaculture.
But isn't the licensing process handled at a panel level before it makes it to the minister?
It is, for sure, but at the end of the day, the minister still has to be involved in that process and should have a unique knowledge of it. And, the reality of it is, and everyone, we know that. We asked these questions back in early March, Paddy. We knew that these decisions were made in early March. We knew they were sitting on the minister's desk, and he didn't have time to sign them. Again, the Premier needs to show some leadership, hold his ministers accountable, and we need to be sitting at the table right now with the harvesters, processors, and government trying to find a way forward. If we let this process play out the way it looks like it's going to play out, and we have a major delay in this process again this year, and the boats don't go underwater, this will have a massive effect on rural Newfoundland. And we're talking not just plant workers, not just fisher people, not just processors. We're talking every little store, mom and pop store. We're talking transportation, grocery stores, everything. This industry is huge, and for this not to be a huge priority right now with the Liberal government is shocking to me.
I get the concept of leadership and getting people in the room, but getting people in the room has proven to be fruitless. What we need is change, because we've seen fisheries ministers come and go, meetings with all the so-called stakeholders involved, handshakes and winks and nods, and then consequently they all leave, go back to their own corners, and nothing changes.
Yeah, so we had an opportunity for change, Paddy, with the Blackwood report, and government pushed it aside. And this is what I'm getting at. We really, and I don't disagree with you one little bit, we need to find a better way to do things. Part of that means looking after, we had a year to prepare for this. We knew what happened last year. We started asking questions in House of Assembly in early March. We highlighted exactly what was going to happen, and here we are. Look at this morning. If you want to talk about planning, this morning at the Confederation Building, it was the Premier, obviously, the Minister of Justice or someone. The Confederation Building is full of RNC officers up there today anticipating a protest. They shut down, the Fisher people shut down the Petton Building 2 days. We didn't see any RNC, anyone there whatsoever. The minute it moved to the Confederation Building, and it made the Premier look bad, we had RNC officers everywhere. This morning, they're there doing the same thing again. Instead of bringing RNC officers to the Confederation Building, we should be bringing harvesters to the Confederation Building, processors to the Confederation Building, and we should be sitting down with them and showing some leadership.
What is on the Minister Lovelace's desk that you don't think should be inside his portfolio? Because, inside the world of the fishery, all the things regarding transportation and the marine sector, that's inside the Department of Transportation. So what is his responsibility that you think keeps him from doing what you say it should be his job, his core job?
Yeah, so forestry, agriculture, all of the other things outside of the fishery. So right now, there's massive issues with Crown lands. There's massive issues, obviously, with agriculture. You talk to the farmers, you talk to everyone involved with that whole portfolio and how since it's been combined together. There's issues right across the board. I think that the fishery should be standalone.
It's a huge portfolio. I'm not going to argue that. There's a lot to it and a lot of important features therein. And once again, I do see where you're going or coming from regarding getting people in the same room, but this is, I think the first word you used was leadership, and that's what it's going to take, because it's going to, someone's going to have to spend some political capital here, one way or the other. We can talk about the lobbying size and effort of one side or the other, harvesters versus processors, but if we're going to continue to have some sort of solid reputation in the market, look like stable partners, people that buyers want to do business with, and that's both sides, the harvester and the processor, we're picking away at it. One of the big problems inside of crab, and I hate to focus solely on crab because it's just so lucrative that's where the conversation goes, but we kind of got maybe fooled ourselves subconsciously back in 2021. £7.60 was never going to be the reality long term. The whole market flip-flopped. It went from, crab, generally speaking, found its spot on a white tablecloth inside a restaurant in New York City. People were at home, had more money to spend. Consequently, that home-type operations with buying crab, that really turned the market on its head. It was going to go away. The market was going to, get back to the normal course of business, but yet I think we kind of fooled ourselves that £7.60 was the new norm.
Yeah, I don't know, Patty. I mean, part of that had to do with the Alaskan crab moratorium, Russian crab moratorium, so there was a bit more to that, what happened there than that. And yes, people ought to have known that the price was going to go down. You know, at the end of the day, I think when we talk about what's happening here in Newfoundland right now, every single time we turn, we're hearing the word crisis. I mean, I don't think in the history of this province we've heard the word crisis so much. I mean, if it's a healthcare crisis, a housing crisis, cost of living crisis, education crisis, now it's a fishery crisis. We need leadership, and we need someone to address the problem in the fishery right now, and we need someone to get the fishermen and women and the harvesters and processors at the table to try and find a path forward. Obviously, this has been a complete failure. The dismissal of the Blackwood report is no different than every other report that's been done by this government. They put it on a shelf and they forget about it if it doesn't suit them, and at some point, those things have to change, and that's leadership, and that's what we're lacking right now.
Yeah. That Russian crab issue, that didn't really have a huge impact on our fishery, I don't think. I mean, they flooded the Japanese market. People were mad about that because we lost buyers in Japan. Our real home for our product is the northeastern United States, by and large. You know, we sell in some parts of domestic markets here in Canada, but it's the northeast. That's where a lot of the crab lands and ends up. Lloyd, I appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for the call.
Take care, Paddy. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye. Lloyd Parr, the PC member for Terra Nova. Final break of the morning. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Mark, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty, how's it going today?
Doing great. How about you?
Good. I'm just calling because it's now been 100 days since John Abbott promised to have the folks at Tent City housed. So that was it's been 100 days since Christmas, and I just want people to know that that's the case. Perhaps people want to give his office a call and ask why it hasn't been done. And I can tell you that there are still barriers to folks getting into what's been offered, which is shelters. And things like, people have pets, people are couples. And we've seen, the recent budget announcement. There's $14 million budgeted for 140 room supportive housing complex, which is the Comfort Inn. So that's about $100,000 per room, and we still have very few details publicly available for that. So I just wanted to throw out some concern for folks and let people know that that John Abbott's on his website, 697-1057. That's the phone number. People should consider calling and finding out what's going on.
I'd like to have a bit of information about what's going on at the Comfort Inn. We don't know how many people are there. We don't know the wraparound services. We don't have final costs, including security and food and all the rest. So, what was announced as being a real big deal, a transformative place in a transformative setting, and nothing since. So we don't know the vetting or the eligibility criteria. It's all been a little bit maddening.
Absolutely, and we've seen Tent City grow since then. I think at Christmas time there was like 2 or 3 people there, and there's about 18 now. So things have grown, and as it heats up, I've been saying this on your show all along. As the snow disappears, as we get closer to summer, we're going to see more and more people in tents. So I'd really like to see a solution that works. And if the Comfort Inn is the government solution, then we need to know about it. We need to hear from the government and, from John Abbott, from Doug Pawson, from perhaps our new housing minister, and we need to hear what's going on.
Permanent solutions aren't available overnight. Now, we have kind of dragged our heels provincially and nationally on this particular issue, and different municipalities are handling these issues in different ways. Some are quite heavy-handed, some a little bit more empathetic. But the short-term solution is not really there if you don't include things like shelters and the Comfort Inn or whatever else is available. So what exactly, and I've asked this question before, other than those 2 options, given the timeline it's going to take to reopen some shuttered housing units and or build new units, what exactly can be done?
Yeah, I mean, permanent housing is ultimately the solution that everybody wants, right? Everybody wants to be in a house. But we do need, and what we've seen, and what I've been talking about on your show, Patty, over the years, probably like 2 or 3 years now, is supportive housing. We need supportive housing. We're seeing issues with justice. We're seeing issues with with folks that just can't manage themselves, can't handle themselves. There are no supports for them, and it's sort of bleeding out into the communities. People need help. So I think that's a solution. However you do it. I mean, there's houses for sale in St. John's. There's houses for sale across the province. Why is NL Housing not just simply buying some houses that don't need repairs and putting people in them? I don't know. There are lots of emergency solutions that have been, look at any other province. In fact, look at every other province, and we're seeing other types of shelters being used. And I've been advocating for that solution to be used here, but it hasn't caught on. We've not heard government look at that, and instead we're spending, like I said, $100,000 per room at the Comfort Inn, and we know nothing about it.
Yeah, now the issue regarding zoning for different types of structures and the different types of structures that could be funded with some federal monies in particular, that thankfully has happened, except it hasn't happened on the ground. I mean, I would suggest people look at, the whole concept of manufactured homes, and there's one product in particular called Boxable that looks like a tailor-made short-term solution that could see, as a bit of a turnstile as people move into different types of more adequate housing. But those opportunities are there. Now, municipalities do have to play along here and ensure that zoning, is commensurate with actual need, as opposed to what has been in sometimes the obstinate reliance on single-family dwellings, which, even in the most recent federal announcement, which I don't think is going to go too far, $6 billion with all those caveats regarding duplexes and townhouses and triplexes and multi-unit buildings, that's going to have to be part of the solution here, because even inside the world of safe and affordable housing, we're also talking about urban sprawl versus building up, and they all have a direct relationship, because at some point this boils down to not only morality and societal responsibility, it does boil down to fiscal reality. So that all has to be accommodated, but there's a bit of heel dragging. There was good news from the City of St. John's. Whether or not that's going to hit the affordability target and access to safe housing for people who are precariously housed and or homeless, it remains to be seen, but they're $20 million ahead in building permits this year versus the entirety of last year, which is remarkable after one quarter of 2024. I'll give you the final word this morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that shows it's pretty amazing what can be done when people put their heads together and make it work. And I actually agree with Lloyd Parrott. What he said, we need leadership on this. And really, this is the 100-day mark, Patty. So it's been 100 days since it was promised, and we've heard nothing, just peeps. So I would urge folks, especially in the community of the Colonial Building, to call John Abbott. And like I said, number on his website is 697-1057. Find out what's going on, because when summer hits and everybody's hanging out in Bannerman Park, people are going to wonder what's going on next door. And if there's 60 tents there at that point, I think there's going to be concerns, and that can be alleviated, along with the fact that we still have people living in the cold in unsafe conditions.
Yeah, and I don't know what they've been offered beyond emergency shelters, and they're not all created equal. And we're still waiting for what has been unbelievable, not present in the first place, is some minimum guidelines with enforcement and regulations, and changing the way emergency shelters are funded and who's in there and what they're responsible for. I mean, those minimum guidelines, you would think in any normal society they would have been in place decades ago, let alone years ago. I appreciate your time this morning, Mark. Thanks for the call.
Yes, we need the shelter standards as well. And as far as I know, that that document has been prepared by the consultants in Ontario. And January was the announcement on that. We haven't heard anything. So yeah, thanks a lot, Patty. And I just hope that people can think about, what are we going to do? It's been 100 days. We need to move forward.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Patty.
Take care, Mark. Bye-bye. Right, Mark had the last word, but we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.